how to work and live by a winner's mindset as a team. It's like, one of those rowing teams, right? And, we all remember those movies or the college sport where everyone's rowing. No, look, I'm not that into sports, so pardon my sports analogies. But I always believe that a team, it's like a rowing all in the right direction, right? And if any given day, because every day, we're going to talk about how to have a perfect daily structure or how, perfect sales calls and all these things, not being as efficient as you possibly can is like having your paddle out of the water and watching the rest of your team paddle for you. And then taking days where you might get distracted, like scrolling on Instagram or randomly getting distracted and pulled in a bunch of different directions is actually not just you getting distracted, which can affect the team, but it's imagine you actually rowing the wrong direction. While your team is trying to row in one direction, you're rowing the other way. So even these little teeny distractions, are so freaking crucial to be paying attention to, because I'm not saying we don't get distracted. I mean, for God's sakes, we're human beings. I mean, human psychology is this fascinating thing, to be 100% not distracted is tough to do, but it is possible. So I just want to talk about how to, show up in a winner's mindset and have a winning day, because the more you can stack, which we'll talk about how to do, the more success you'll see in your life faster and with ease. Because who here would like to be more successful financially, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, right? I think we all would, right? Love it. Yeah. And it starts with making a lot of 2mm shifts, which we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to rip here. There's no exact order to all this, but I wanted to, these are a bunch of talking points I want to talk about. So one of the biggest things, which I know some of you are salespeople, some of you are in the marketing position, data, and all these different things, but this is for everybody, no matter, even if I'm talking about sales, it still matters for everyone. So the first thing I want to just talk about, which I think is going to, as a salesperson myself, who I've made over 1 million cold calls in my career, one thing I just want to set the tone. No one gives a shit how many calls you make. I want to make that very clear. And I think too many people become obsessive over the wrong metrics. Okay. So no matter if you're in sales or any other position, it's like getting obsessed with a metric that actually doesn't mean anything. It's like saying, well, I work 8 hours a day, or I get to work on time. No one gives a shit. It's great that you're on time, but it's like an expected thing. So in sales, it's the same thing. Well, no one really cares how many calls you make, right? Because sure, you should be making 2, 3, 4, 500 plus calls a day. You should be making however many calls it takes in order to get the result. Where it's like, as an example with the workout, I don't care, as an example, how much weight you're lifting specifically. It's like, did you actually get the workout you were supposed to get, right? It's like no one ever talks to you and say, well, I breathed 7,000 times today. You should be fucking breathing. That's a plus, right? So sales is the exact same way. So no matter what position you're in, it's talking about focusing on the right activities, because you can say you've made 500 calls a day. I know many people who tell me like, oh, well, I made or several hundred calls a day every day for X amount of period of time. That's great. And let's talk about the metrics that are actually more important, which is how many conversations did you have today? How many leads did you generate? How many offers did you write? How many tours did you schedule with a real, true, and vetted buyer? How many times did you ask for a referral? How many times did you ask or close for a listing opportunity? How many times did you present an offer to a seller today? Because a lot of these other metrics are way more important than just how many calls, but we have this focus on this thing because it's like that sexy thing like calls, okay? So I want to be very clear. It's about paying attention to the metrics that actually move the business forward. So in each of your businesses, I want you to take a quick note here, take a quick 30 seconds, and I want you just to think about and write down what the most important, maybe 1 or 2 or maximum 3 metrics are in your specific activities on a day-to-day basis, right? That will actually make you money, that will actually move the business forward. And there's dozens of metrics on any given day, right? Starting from when you show up to the office to how clean your desk is, to how much time do you actually spend on a dialer, how much time you spend in your CRM, how many calls you make, how many conversations you have, how many leads did you generate, how many offers did you get, how many appointments did you schedule, how many appointments did you conduct, how many offers did you write, how many offers did you get signed, how many offers did you present, right? How many offers did you get accepted? I mean, there's so many metrics, but only a few of them actually have a dollar figure attached to them specifically, because you can do so much of it, right? Like you could make your calls, you could have conversations, you could pitch listings, you could do all these types of things, which is good. But if you never, ever, as an example, a very important one, which is how many offers did you present to a seller today? How many offers did you get written up from a buyer today? How many offers did you get accepted today from a seller? And the reason why I say that is because you can schedule 1,000 tours, but if a buyer never writes up an offer, they never sign the offer, you never present the offer to a seller, and the seller never accepts it, you're never going to get a deal. It's never going to, money in your checking account. So I think it's incredibly crucial that we understand as salespeople and as any any role in the business, we understand what are our main core functions, our main activities that actually get us paid and get us paid fast, and focus on, if I can just blow up these few numbers and get these numbers to, 20, increase it by 10, 20, 30, 40%, my business will increase by multiple percentage points. Next, does anybody know what the purpose of a cold call is? Let's say you're talking to a seller. Okay, it's a cold call to a seller. Does anybody know what the purpose of that call is?
To see if they are interested in transacting or conducting business.
100%. No, perfect. You got it exactly right. We're just figuring out if they're interested, open-minded, right, in transacting in some fashion. Right? That is all we're trying to do. Now, obviously, there are multiple paths from that point of, once you've confirmed that, of where you can go down with it, right? To take a listing, to tour it, to broker price opinion. I mean, there's just so many different things here. But more importantly, I like to figure out this. How much are they open to selling for? Details that support the price they're actually asking. And then discuss the next steps to speak to them. Or discuss what next steps have to happen and when you'll speak to them. Those are three very simplistic things. You speak to a seller. I want to know, are we transacting? How much you're looking for? Any and all details that will support the value in which they're asking, or a value in general, because I honestly could care less what they're asking, but it does play a role in how much time and energy and effort I will give this lead, right? Someone who wants 20 million for a property that's worth 10, we're probably not going to spend a ton of time, but if we're in a range, we're probably going to spend a little bit more time with them. And then lastly, and also very important, which is confirming the next steps, right? You're going to send them an email, you're going to send them an offer, you're going to do whatever, or you're going to schedule a tour, time to meet, whatever you're going to do. And then the next time you're going to chat with that person, okay? And you try to coordinate that all on, you can do that all on the very first phone call. All that is possible. And then obviously where you go from there, can dictate, like how you're going to transact with them. Obviously you can talk with Anthony about exactly which, path to take. But it's important that you understand, like, if you're on the phone call, which we just discussed, you have to, know we're going to transact, how much, details to support the price, discuss the next steps, and discuss the time to, and coordinate and schedule time to speak to them next. If you don't do that on a phone call, was the phone call a success?
Say probably not. And then Henry, I do have a question that probably comes up a lot for you. Should we, and this is kind of just most of the time, 90% of the time, should we be saying a price on the first phone call, or do you ever have situations where you wait to give a price to where you get the details and you call back with a price?
I don't think there's a perfect one-size-fits-all solution with this type of situation. There are going to be times where you're having a really good conversation, the price is somewhat reasonable, and you might be able to present an offer to them on the very first phone call. But if someone is so I'm not interested, and is giving you a lot of pushback, and like they're like, hey, I'm not interested, I'm in a meeting, thanks, I'm probably not going to push for.
Right.
So I'm saying, like, it's not a one-size-fits-all. If the conversation is moving in a positive direction, their pricing, their guidance on their own pricing is somewhere in a ballpark where I feel like, we're in a 20%, 10% range of value. There is a lot of value to providing an offer to that individual on the first phone call. However, it's not I don't tell every single one of my salespeople to do that. I probably would not suggest on the very first phone call that it's a standard, but I would say every time that there is an opportunity in which to do so, you should, because it is subjective. Sales is subjective, right? Like the level of interest of the individual is subjective, right? Like, it's situational. I think that, it's understanding when that situation is present versus when it's not.
Got it.
And being able to dictate that, which, by the way, comes from making lots of phone calls and being in the pocket, right? Like being in that moment, and then being able to, maneuver. One thing, we'll talk about in a minute is objection handling. And I think that it's one of the biggest differentiators between people who are winners over time and people who are not, or it's one of the many reasons, right? Like there are a lot of people who make a lot of phone calls. There's people here, right, on this call who probably make way more phone calls than I do today. And there's also people that are not present on this call, okay, other companies maybe who make more calls than you guys do, which, I mean, it's just, there are just people who maybe make 2,000 calls a day, right, all day long. However, the skill factor is a huge factor in your success, because you could be doing less output, but being infinitely more skillful, and you could have a way different result, right? So as an example, if it was me versus Michael Jordan in playing basketball, and we're both sitting and we're just shooting free throws. Now I'm a 5'6", Jewish guy who doesn't play any sports, okay? And you got Michael Jordan, who's 6 foot whatever, and the master of the game. And if we're both standing at the free throw line, and we each have 5 shots, he's probably going to kick my ass. Mm-hmm. Because his skill is so much higher than mine. However, if you gave me 500 shots, you can now have the edge over skill, where skill isn't the only factor. Because if you're doing infinitely more production, infinitely more effort, infinitely more action, you can beat skill some of the time. At least you have the opportunity to possibly possibly beat skill, right? With a decent likelihood of that happening. However, if we're on the phones and we all make the same amount of phone calls and one of us is infinitely more skilled, as an example, the person with more skill will dominate the field. But the way the way that you can even the playing field, like I did at the very beginning of my career, was that I was willing to make $500 to $1,000, do whatever it takes kind of attitude. So my next, the next point here that I have here is when you go to war, if we're all going to war together, right? Which, by the way, being in business is like going to war in some fashions. Okay, not every aspect, obviously, but in a lot of ways, it's like going to war. And if there's either the people that will do whatever it takes to win, or there are the people who are okay with losing and probably going to die a slow death. So in business, this is the type of example of the people who over time will make more and more money every year, right? Who will do whatever it takes, who will work endless hours, who will do, who will go above and beyond. It's like even like the small things. Like we all know, like those people maybe at home or people that we've lived with, where like there's just like that piece of trash or a piece of laundry that's just sitting on the floor and they like step over it every single fucking time when they're walking around, and you're like, Jesus Christ, do you not pay attention to this kind of stuff? Not to shut up my wife or anything, but like she does this sometimes, and by the way, so do I. But there are just some things we're not paying attention to. But it's like these are the things that in business really fucking matter. The one or two or three times where like you don't go exactly to script and you go off script and then the seller hangs up on you, or they say they come up with an objection and you don't know how to handle that objection, and then they hang up on you and you don't get the deal. Right? It's those small little things that we don't think as important, just like stepping over trash or a piece of laundry. We're thinking, oh, it's not that important for me to do right now, right? We've all said it or done this in some fashion in our life, and then we regret it later down the road, right? Where it's like it actually has this butterfly effect later down in life, right? So practicing your scripts. Who here spends at least 15 minutes a day practicing and role-playing scripts?
Nobody.
Like that, right? So like that as an example is a really easy way, right, where you can actually practice your scripts, because like it's like, guys, we all know this, okay? And again, I don't watch any sports, but we all know that if you watch the Super Bowl, how many hours do you think they practice for their amount of gameplay that they have in the Super Bowl? Just imagine thousands of hours go into the practice to play 60 true minutes of football. And some of those players are only on the field for 8 fucking minutes, but they've practiced for thousands of hours. And this is why they get paid tens of millions of dollars, because they don't get paid tens of millions of dollars because they lollygag on the field and they don't show up to win. They're paid all this money because of the crazy amount of effort and energy and practice that they put in even before getting on the team. And then once they're on the team, then they're putting in another thousands and thousands and thousands of hours to perfect their craft, so that when they show up on the field for a few minutes, they perform better than anyone in the world. So obviously we're not these professional football players. To bring it down to our reality today, it's what can you do every day to give yourself the edge over time? Who here speaks another language? Does anybody speak another language as an example?
Yeah, Croatian.
Okay, amazing. But like, take this as an example, an instrument as an example, where it's like, it's not because you don't have to play the instrument. Most people, as an example, whether an instrument or a language, right? Like, it's not like if you looked at the last 10 or 12, how many minutes of Croatian do you think you've even spoke in the last year?
10.
That's what I'm saying. Very, very, very minimal, right?
Yeah.
But it's not because of the last 10 minutes, but it's because of the decades over time that you've spent working on that craft. It's like in our world, in our business, how can we take those types of realities? Well, it's like in sales, right? It's like you're either doing thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of phone calls throughout your career, or how do you shorten it? Well, it's like you out practice your competition. Because if you can practice and drill certain things that you continue to, you get, like, as an example, an objection we all probably get all the time in sales is I'm not interested, right? Like, I don't care if you're selling real estate, if you're selling pens or clothing or anything. Hey, I'm not interested. It's a very common objection. And there's a lot of people who do not know how to handle this objection. And there's a lot of people who also know how to handle the objection, but don't do it correctly on the phone. So when you're on the phone with that individual and they say, I'm not interested, it's a very, which happens all the freaking time, and not spending the moments of practice drilling that 1,000 freaking times is going to end up affecting your long-term reality financially, and probably even emotionally, because working in, as a 100% commission salesperson, where that has so much effect on your bottom line and your future, right, can cause a lot of emotional stress. Right? To avoid that, we can practice these little activities such as role playing. Everything that we do here is about these 1 millimeter shifts, these 2 millimeter shifts, these 1% improvements every single day. No one's saying that you need to become the greatest in the world tomorrow, but we are saying that the people who become the greatest in the world out-practice and outperform everyone over a very long period of time. Because imagine if you just took 15 to 30 minutes a day to actually practice the thing that you do every single day. Not to do it with a client, okay? Because if you're not practicing with someone on this call, that means you're practicing with a client. And it's actually when you're practicing with a client, you have the possibility of losing out on tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenues. For all of us here, we can actually practice on one another and simulate the opportunity that may happen very soon in the future. And the more you drill it and the more you practice with it, the more you're going to be prepared for that opportunity when it arises.